Welcome back to Turning Point Tonight, where together we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. Let's check in with White House correspondent for Turning Point, Monica Page. Monica, at the White House today, we were talking briefly before this about the fact that there was not a ton going on, but of the stuff that is going on, can you fill us in on what's happening? And then I have an interesting question for you after that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it seems like there's nothing going on, at least not visually. But of course, behind closed doors, the president is hosting a ambassador to China ceremony swearing in. So he opened that up to some of the media members to ask questions. But ultimately, the press briefing today that was supposed to be scheduled for 1 p.m. was canceled just due to the fact that the president wanted to open up the Oval Office to the media. So you not only just have access to Caroline Levitt, but you always have access to the president himself on a day-to-day basis. So even though it seems like there's a quieter White House on the outside, there's still a lot going on the inside.
Well, it was fascinating when we were talking briefly beforehand. You're like, yeah, there's not much going on. JD's at a Munich or security conference. The president has a swearing in for China, and it got me thinking. What was the last administration like? Because we're so fixated on what's going on at the White House now that there's stuff going on and on and on. The president is super busy, keeping his schedule jam-packed. What did your colleagues do in the last administration? If this is a boring day with the president hosting dignitaries that are going to be out to foreign lands and the Security Council, all that sort, what did the average day look like to your colleagues? And are they exhausted now at this point?
I can tell you in confidence that we would show up around 11 a.m. Eastern time, stay for about 2 or 3 hours. The White House would call a lid around 2 p.m. Eastern time, and you wouldn't hear from the president at all in the early evening or late evening at that. You just wouldn't hear from the president at all. Even if there were going to be a press briefing, it would be maybe about 30 to 45 minutes, and you really wouldn't get any answers. It was always, oh, I just don't have anything, or oh, like we'll circle back to you on that request. But it was very, very quiet. Not every single tent on this Pebble Beach here was filled. There would be some
Interesting.
reporters that just wouldn't show up. Maybe they'd just be from the office, maybe. I don't know. But it was a lot quieter than it is today. And it's not even that quiet.
Yeah, real seriously. And you mentioned the president had lunch with the vice president, and the vice president obviously is participating in the Munich Security Conference. Can you talk a little bit about what
Yeah.
Vice President J.D. Vance was saying there, and where the Munich Security Conference actually happens to be?
So before I realized where the Munich Security Conference was, I thought it was in Germany. It was right here in Washington, D.C. the entire time. So when I was kind of doing some research into what exactly was on the table for JD Vance at this summit, he basically gave us an inside look into how this administration is dealing with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And I think what's interesting is that the United States has really been trying to mediate the two nations, trying to appease both sides and try to have conversations, to which JD Vance is calling strategic realism. He used that as a way to say, hey, you don't have to agree with the other side or what the other side is trying to do, but at least hear each other out and try to come to some kind of conclusion. For what we understand, Russia apparently wants peace, but apparently they've been asking for too much on their side. Ukraine wants a 30-day ceasefire, but Russia says that doesn't fit into their strategic plan. So trying to kind of mediate those two sides is kind of proving to be a little bit difficult. So as a result, the United States is really giving maybe 4 to 5 weeks to kind of revisit the conversation overseas and then dedicate a week at a time to kind of come together and say, hey, have we decided on what we want to do here moving forward? But the next steps is, how do we get both sides to talk to each other? How do we get Ukraine and Russia to come to the table, look at each other face to face, and try to figure out a solution? But since they won't really do that and won't, agree to a ceasefire, they're kind of trying to see how would another long-term plan kind of look like in the area. And JD Vance kind of said, if you talk to both sides for about 30 minutes or so, both sides will kind of just say how much they hate each other. And at the end of the day, it's not about how much you hate each other. It's about coming together and seeing what looks best economically for both sides' best interests. So to see a little bit of an inside look into how the United States is dealing with this really was very interesting. And I believe that this administration could see an end to this conflict in the maybe coming months, say, but it was definitely a very positive and encouraging, reinforcing conversation on the world stage, of course.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very difficult and contentious time to be in, and I don't
Mhm.
want to make light of it, but the Munich Security Council in Washington, D.C. reminds me of my beachfront Miami property in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Monica Page, Turning Point White House correspondent, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Now, for more shocking information, the defund the police movement was ubiquitous around the country. Wokes everywhere in major cities across the country saying, we have to defund the police. If only someone would have mentioned, hey, that's not a good idea, then maybe they wouldn't have done it. But unfortunately, they did. And now the stats are out. In a new report that was reported on in the New York Post, some of the statistics may shock you. Let's bring our panel back before we talk about some of these just unbelievable statistics that everyone saw coming. Bobby, the report says this: the arrests and stops went down 40% in the post-George Floyd era. And while arrests and stops by the police went down, the number of murders went up by 54%. Now, when that rebounded, the arrests and stops rebounded, going up about 37%, and murders went down about 32%. It seems to be a direct correlation. The more stops and arrests police make, the less people get killed. I think that's a good thing. I probably could have told you, and by probably mean definitely could have told you, that was exactly what was going to happen. But I feel like this is repetitive. But at what point is it going to go through the heads of the libs that the floofy sound stuff, like we were talking about last segment, isn't good? Sounds good, doesn't work. It's kind of a saying we have on the right side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when right after George Floyd, I remember them talking about. I remember reading news articles about how police officers were not pulling over people of color that were driving and speeding on the highway because they were afraid of being labeled as racist by pulling these people over. And as a result, all of the car accident deaths and motor vehicle deaths for people of color started to go up as a result. So it's like the thing that always, again, like I was saying before, is that I understand what they're theoretically trying to do, but how it actually plays out in practice is not important to your virtue signaling, like general leftoid. It's like they don't really care what happens. All they care about is being perceived as virtuous by endorsing the policy that should work in theory, but actually doesn't. And you only believe that it would work in theory if you don't care about results and you don't care about consequences and you don't look at what happens later. It's almost like if you release a headline in the newspaper and then when it turns out to not be true, you put the redaction on page 15 in the last paragraph. They don't care about what actually occurs. They only care about appearing empathetic at the beginning. So is it any surprise to anybody that more people are getting murdered when you take the cops out of these neighborhoods? And on top of that, I saw a video the other day where people were like, police are racist because there's more cops in the brown neighborhoods. And it's just like when the police officers come into the building at the beginning of the morning, they're like, here's where the crimes are. Here's where we need to go. The fact that it ends up being those people isn't a decision based on the race, because if more murders were happening in the quote unquote white neighborhood or the Filipino neighborhood, they would be there. So it's like they don't really care about how things cause an effect. They don't care about connecting the dots of what really happens. The only thing that matters in the mind of your average leftoid is perceiving as empathetic and then putting it out there to prove that you're one of theirs, you're on their side, and you're a virtuous person, but you don't care about what actually happens. And then they say, well, look, I care about people. And it's like, if you cared about people, you would care about the results. So we actually tend to care more about them because we care about what's actually happening, not how it makes us look. That's the important thing.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. When they do issue corrections or accidentally say something true, I guarantee, I don't have any proof of this right now, but because I haven't looked, but I guarantee you, like there's some Mother Jones article out there that has defund the police, and then like it's a 22 paragraph article, and like paragraph 21. So, by the way, none of this actually worked. So, and that's how they do things. Priya, everybody and their mother could have said, hey, this isn't gonna work. Why was it such a big movement, in your opinion? Just kind of being around it, especially being in a blue state. Why was this such a massive movement that didn't stop really until it just kind of lost fervor? It wasn't like the logic took over. It just kind of fizzled out. How did it get to be such a big thing?
Yeah, well, you make a you make a really great point when you say that it just kind of fizzled out. There was no actual correction, even on this, even in part of the politicians that pushed for these agendas and these policies to defund the police. The problem is that, like Bobby mentioned, a lot of these neighborhoods that have high murder, high crime rates are minority neighborhoods. And what these cities, neighborhoods need is more policing, not less policing, to protect the population that actually isn't committing the crimes. But Yeah, I don't know. It's really ridiculous to me that these types of agendas just over time keep getting pushed time and time again. And yeah, like Bobby said, it's in large part the bleeding heart liberal, but it's just again not following these policies and these ideas to their logical conclusions, right? Less
Yeah.
police means more crime at the end of the day. That's just the simple fact of it. And like you said, everybody and their mother did say this, but it's a fallacy of not being able to actually think through the conclusions of what you're trying to do and get done.
Yeah, speaking of the libtoids that would believe in that sort of thing, Dr. Jill Biden has a new job. She is going to be leading the California based think tank, the Milken Group, based in Santa Monica, in the initiative aimed at improving women's health. Now, Priya, as a doctor, I would hope that Dr. Jill Biden would have a lot of say in the women's health. Do you think she'll make a huge impact here?
With her doctorate that she has as a teacher, I think she's gonna make a large impact on the medical community. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just really ridiculous that for so long this was such a contentious topic on whether to call her Mrs. Biden or Dr. Biden. It's just ridiculous. You are not a physician. You are not a licensed physician. You do not earn that title. And for it to be such a passionate issue on her part is just ridiculous. I the initiative is a great idea, improving studies within women's health, but I really don't see how Dr. Jill specifically is going to make any large headway in this issue.
She's a doctor. Whoopi Goldberg wanted her to be the Surgeon General.
I
What?
know.
How could she not? Bobby, not to take this too much more seriously, but here's what I see about this. First of all, why would you not just retire? To me, this is kind of justification or verification that Jill was the one in the White House pulling the strings, saying, "Run, Joe, just keep running. I want to stay in it." This seems to me of her wanting to stay in it, and it's kind of proof of that. And I don't know, does that justify it in your mind that she was the one pulling the strings, trying to keep the decrepit old President Houseplant in the running?
Well, I think that is obviously true. I think that we all saw and witnessed that. So that is a certainty. But it's actually interesting how I see this because I believe that it's actually like a symbiotic relationship. Whereas this institute gets press and gets attention and gets notoriety and ultimately will attract donors as a result of her name recognition. And it also allows her to basically play as if she is significant or actually matters. And it's yet another perfect example of caring about how something looks, not caring about what actually happens. I would guarantee you that there's a prominent woman that is highly intelligent in these fields of health that could do something that would be really impactful and important, but it might not garner as many headlines. So instead of taking the person that could actually do something that could draw attention to the institute as a result of the positive output of what they're creating, they would rather just bring a person in that is going to be purely a headline, that is purely going to be a show person. And for Dr. Jill, she absolutely loves it because she wants to be relevant. She wants to be on the cover of Vogue. She wants to be on the cover of Vanity Fair. She loves that attention, and anything that could continue to bring her into the spotlight, she's going to obviously take. So they're both kind of like grifting off of each other. And the person that loses is the person that would benefit as a result of this institute doing something that really is significant to health. She's not going to contribute anything of any value. She's only going to get headlines. And a lot of those headlines are going to be consumed, recirculated, and regurgitated by us, people that think it's hilarious, but they don't care. All they want is eyeballs. All they believe is that what matters is the optics, not what actually comes through. And there's probably another health professional, boss female that could produce a lot that wouldn't get the headlines that would ultimately be more beneficial to their cause, but they completely overlooked it for Dr. Jilly.
Yeah, they looked at Dr. Joe Biden and said, "See, say Podway, you can totally do whatever it is that this is requiring." Priya Patel, Bobby Sauce, thank you guys so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up, a fascinating clip from Alex Clark's Culture Apothecary podcast. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.